Hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning in to News 9 Live. That's the question that we're going to discuss and try to probe over the next couple of minutes. Because today we've got a special show lined up for you where we dive into the shifting dynamics of Kashmir. Because after the decades of turmoil and bloodshed, a new horizon is emerging over there. The once pervasive Kashmiri Jihad appears to be disappearing. Since the abrogation of Article 370, incidents of Pakistan-sponsored terror have witnessed a steady decline. However, there are crucial questions that one has to explore over here. Even as Srinagar hosts the historic G20 meeting, India has successfully sent a resolute message of unwavering peace. But will this newfound peace endure? Moreover, as the number of targeted killings needs to reach zero, is this new hybrid form of terror which has taken the place of jihadist Kashmir, is that something that we need to be wary of? Join us in the comment sections down below as we analyze the prospects and the challenges ahead and stay informed on this significant development shaping the future of the region. Kashmir's changing landscape, jihad being on the decline, prospects, challenges, and the hybrid threat. But before that, before we expand this discussion, we've got a Lieutenant General on the broadcast with us. We've got former DGP. We've got a man behind this particular story as well. Before we move into that, take a look at this snippet of the documentary on our News 9 Plus application. It's the world's first news OTT application. It's available on the Google Play Store, on the Apple App Store, on the website, on the internet. Do check it out for nuanced perspectives and cutting-edge documentaries. Is jihad dying in Kashmir? That's the question. Take a look at this snippet and we'll come back for more.
The Jihad machine brainwashed Kashmiri youth.
We saw it going so bad.
We were not prepared for it.
Phases of turbulence.
जम्मू एंड कश्मीर के पीए को आप भारत का हिस्सा नहीं मानते हो क्या? एग्रेसिव ना हो, जान दे देंगे इसके लिए।
Today we have a good control.
There is a feeling of normalcy that is setting in.
Kashmir, marred by conflict and violence. For decades, the shadow of Pakistan-sponsored terror had eclipsed the Muslim-majority region. Local youth were radicalized in the late 1980s by Pakistan's spy agency, Inter-Services Intelligence. High on the idea of jihad, a religious war in the name of Islam that terrorized the Indian state. Many of them crossed the border to be trained by the jihadis. 4 years since the abrogation of Article 370, a semblance of calm has returned to the valley. Infiltration of terrorists from Pakistan is at an all-time low. Peace no longer seems to be a distant dream.
I nostalgically remember Kashmir since the first time I went there in 1980 December. We could move from our transit camps, board a public transport bus, go to Lal Chowk, come back, go to a movie hall, and that was the time when we were waiting for the next move. So our transit camps were the place where we halted. And then we saw it going so bad.
At the Shanghai Cooperation Organization foreign ministers gathering in Goa, when the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, said meaningful discussions between India and Pakistan cannot happen until Article 370 is restored. The day Bhutto was in Goa, 5 Indian personnel were killed in an encounter with terrorists in Poonch. This was days after 5 Indian Army soldiers were killed in a terror attack in the same Jammu region. A Pakistan-based outfit Jaish-e-Mohammed's splinter group claimed responsibility for both these terror attacks. India's Minister for External Affairs, Dr. S. Jaishankar, slammed Bhutto over his remark.
Victims of terrorism do not sit together with perpetrators of terrorism to discuss terrorism. Victims of terrorism defend themselves, counter acts of terrorism, they call it out, they delegitimize it, and that is exactly what is happening. So, to come here and preach these hypocritical words as though we are on the same boat, I mean, they are committing acts of terrorism.
That the valley is on the road to peace is evident with Srinagar hosting its first ever G20 meeting.
India is making a very strong, bold statement to the world. And I think there should be no compromise at all on this issue of the tourism meet which is taking place in Srinagar. It's a very good projection to the world. It is actually embedding the whole idea of the Article 370 having been done away with, etc., Kashmir being fully integrated with India.
After 3 decades of terror and bloodshed, Kashmir hosting a global diplomatic event is historic. While Pakistan is gripped with political, economic and security chaos, India is engaging with the international community in Kashmir, once the hub of jihadi terror. New Delhi wants to send out a loud and clear message to the entire world.
Well, you can watch other nuanced perspectives and cutting-edge documentaries on that application as well. But joining us on the broadcast right now, Lieutenant General Satish Dua, former GOC, 15 Corps, Kashmir, SP Ved, former DGP, Jammu and Kashmir. A very warm welcome to the both of you. But first, gentlemen, I'll have to go back to the man, the journalist behind this story. Aditya Rajkal, my colleague, joins us on the broadcast here. Aditya, first and foremost, for the layman out there, the narrative of jihad, the declining number of terrorist attacks, quote-unquote, Pak-backed, Pakistan-sponsored terrorist attacks, that is on the decline. But in the strapline of the documentary itself, it says hybrid terror is sort of rising. Can you help the viewers understand what this hybrid terror is? And have we come back to square one? Because on the one hand, when a jihadist ideology is dying in J&K, you've got a hybrid terror that's rearing its head.
Well, Kabir, before I come to your question, I'm reporting live from one of the G20 venues and happy to inform you that the G20 site track meeting, the Sherpa track meeting, has been a success here. One of the last events, which was a lunch hosted by the mayor and the first citizen of Srinagar, has just concluded. And I have with me, in fact, the mayor of Srinagar, Junaid Azim Mattu, joining us live. Junaid, if you could join us here, and if we can ask you, how successful has been the G20 event here in Srinagar?
Immensely successful. I've attended G20 events in other parts of the country. They've also been successful, but I might be biased in saying that the Srinagar G20 event has been curated in the most amazing way, with the finest attention to detail in the best possible atmosphere. So I think you would be a better judge of it, but it has been a very immensely successful event.
But viewers have been interested in knowing more about this event because it's been an international event hosted by Srinagar, by you. We want to know that how significant would be tourism here in Srinagar in the coming days. Already we've had record numbers, but will G20 give a further boost to the tourism sector here?
Absolutely, that's the hope. And not just the G20 event, but overall improvement in situation, and this collective spirit of reimagining Srinagar, aspiring for a better future, a happier future. I think Srinagar is all geared up for a bright, prosperous future and record arrival of tourists. We saw record arrival of tourists last year, and we intend to break that record this year.
Well, thank you so much, and congratulations again for hosting this amazing event. Well, that was Junaid.
Aditya, has the rain dampened, what's happening over there?
The event that has just concluded here. The question certainly is that will this help in restoring not just normalcy and peace in Srinagar? The Srinagar city has of course seen a facelift, but also attract more national and international tourists, which has already seen a historic number in the last 2 years. I can also tell you that these G20 nation delegates have visited significant tourist locations in Srinagar and neighboring areas. The main crux of the G20 meeting was around tourism. And now returning to your previous question on terrorism, statistically speaking, ever since the abrogation of Article 370, the numbers of terror attacks, encounters, infiltration attempts, and radicalization and joining of terror groups has also drastically decreased. So yes, things will not change overnight here. Of course, there is some fear that remains in some regions of South Kashmir, particularly Pulwama, Anantnag, Kulgam, and Shopian. But the historic tourist numbers clearly indicates that it seems that the jihad is dying. It's not easy because for the last 30 to 40 years, we've seen a lot of bloodshed, a lot of terrorism, more so planned and conspired by Pakistan, Pakistan's ISI, and of course the terror groups. And of course, there were local separatists here in Kashmir who were responsible for it. There was an ecosystem that was created. But ever since 2017, there's been a hard approach against these radical separatists, Hawala racketeers, and of course, stone pelters and other radicals as well. So clearly, it seems that the image of Kashmir is clearly changing drastically. That's what the presence of G20 nations, really explains to us. And Kashmir is at a cusp, historic cusp right now. It's a beginning of a journey of a Naya Kashmir, a new Kashmir. And let's hope that peace will find an option here and more tourists will come in. And I am standing right in front of the historic and magnificent Dal Lake, where hundreds of tourists have been flocking in through the summer, the winters, and of course, all four seasons.
I was just going to ask you that, Aditya, because just a short while ago, we saw all the delegates, taking a nice stroll at the Nishad Garden near the Dal Lake as well. But it seems like the clouds behind you as well. Has rain been a little bit of a dampener on this really beautiful G20, meeting that's taking place in Srinagar? Historic, if I may add that as well.
Well, yes, absolutely. I was speaking to some senior officers who were present at the Nishad Gardens, the historic Mughal gardens here in Kashmir. And they told me that while, yes, it's been raining since last night heavily across the Kashmir Valley, but the G20 nation delegates were very excited to visit the Nishad Gardens and holding umbrellas after the early morning yoga session at the Lalit Hotel Grand Palace. They visited the Nishad Gardens. They are now excited to visit the Polo View market in the heart of the Srinagar city near Lal Chowk, and further the Jhelum riverfront, which has been refurbished and recreated really in the last few weeks. So clearly, a lot of color, a lot of vibrant energy here in Kashmir Valley. The official Sherpa Track Tourism Working Group meeting on G20 has concluded, but a very positive message going across to the world that the law and order situation has drastically improved. Pakistani terrorism seems to be failing in Kashmir Valley, and India has shown its presence of mind and also focused on development, education, on livelihood opportunities for the local Kashmiris here and to secure their lives completely.
Well, absolutely. I mean, what a time to be alive if you're a delegate attending the G20 meet. It's certainly one of the most beautiful places out of all the G20 locations that the summit has taken place. Aditya, do stay on with us. Lieutenant General Satish Dua, former GOC 15 Corps Kashmir, with us on the broadcast as well. Lieutenant General, we put out those numbers in the documentary as well. What has really changed since the 1980s and the 1990s, those number of attacks constantly coming down? If I could put this question to you as well, Aditya pointed out some of those reasons, some of those factors that have helped in these numbers going down. According to you, what really has changed since 2001? Even though the numbers are going down, hybrid terrorism is a term that is now, being thrown about in, around in the common public. What really has changed ever since the early 2000s? Is there a change in the terrorist strategy here?
In 2000, as you said, in 2001, actually, the terrorism had peaked. I think the number of terrorists killed in 2001, if I have my figures right, was upwards of 2,100. Terrorists used to roam around in thousands in the whole of J&K. From then to now, it's been a long journey. And not only the terrorist violence has been brought under control, especially after the elimination of Burhan Wani and thereafter the kind of hard measures that have been adopted. I was a GOC when Burhan Wani, the HM leader, was eliminated. The valley burned for 3 or 4 months. But after that, hard measures have been put in place, which have been enhanced. These measures were enhanced especially after abrogation or dilution of Article 370 in 2019. And thereafter, we have seen on one hand, the violence is firmly under control. The violence on the streets, that is stone pelting, etc., is has actually vanished from there. Recruitment in terrorism has actually drastically dipped. There are no bans, no hartals. Earlier, a calendar used to be issued by Hurriyat. So there is the uncertainty of life is vanished, and so there is a move towards normalcy. On
Well,
the
that,
other hand,
no, no,
yes, please go
Lieutenant
ahead.
General, do go on, do go on. I'm sorry to interject.
So on the other hand, because it is a union territory, now the center governs directly through a lieutenant governor. Several schemes have been put into motion. A lot of administrative measures have been put into place. A three-tier panchayat is now grassroots empowerment of has taken place by this three-tier panchayat. And what has happened is that on the other hand, we are seeing uh, a steady improvement in the administrative and other issues in Kashmir, including the FDI and investment, etc. So, with the result, tourists have started thronging. Ever since 2019, there has been a record number increase in tourism. What you also asked, Aditya, and what this conference, G20 meeting, is going to achieve, has achieved, is to tell the international community, show them that how freely tourists can move about over here. This would actually negate the travel advisory several countries have put out against Kashmir. And it remains to be seen now. I'm sure the foreign tourists will also start moving in. Domestic tourists are thronging. You don't get a hotel or a shikara or a cab nowadays, but the international tourists will also start to come. And my final point here is that this is a statement. This G20 is a statement. Just like 1 week ago, there was this G7 summit meet in Hiroshima. Japan did it in Hiroshima. It was signaling. It was a statement to hold it in Hiroshima. Similarly, we are holding it
Right.
in. Uh, we have held that in Srinagar to show that Kashmir is an integral part of India and how free it is. It is not like a police state or a militarized zone, as it is the perception being created by our adversary Pakistan in international fora.
Well, no wonder, Lieutenant General, one is unable to find cabs or shikaras with those beautifully LED lights that have been decked up on those shikaras. No wonder you can't catch hold of a shikara over there. But, Lieutenant General, also throw some light about how it was like back then on ground zero. I mean, in transition camps, waiting for military vehicles to take your deployed army personnel from one spot to another, the general eerie feeling in the air. What was that like? I mean, help the viewers, transport them back to what it was like in the 1990s.
When we operated there during my younger days in 80s and late 80s, but 90s really, in 90s, uh, the whenever we went for a cordon and search operation, when we entered an area, the civilians would actually the locals would pull their children inside, close their door shut, and try to have no contact with the security forces, whether it was the army or the police or the Rashtriya Rifles. But cut back to the time when I was the GOC in middle of last decade. Um, Now, not only were the civilians rushing out to meet the security forces, they would start pelting stones at them. They use stone pelting as a force multiplier. They actually tried to do it in concert with, whenever an operation was being carried out, they tried to help the militants, the terrorists to escape and give them adequate warnings. So things have been changing that fast. They started using social media. Burhan Wani and his friends put out their pictures with weapons and unveiled their faces, and they put out the pictures on Facebook. So they started using social media as a force multiplier. They started using social media to mobilize masses for stone pelting, etc. So things were going that also use social media and mainstream media for radicalization. So things were that bad in the middle of last decade. What has happened now is that we've got a firm control, like I said, on one hand, because there is no political interference. There is no political interference whatsoever on the way the security forces conduct their operations. And that is the reason why we've got a firm handle on this. We've also
All right.
managed to, the NIA has managed to cut the fund flow and staunch their fund flow. So we don't have the separatists issuing out a calendar. The separatists are totally marginalized. So they don't issue out calendars and there are no bans and hartals. Life is moving back to normalcy. And just because there is this feeling of normalcy that is setting in. Sometimes the terrorists, guided by their masters from across the border, are forced to, are compelled to do something, create some violence, so that they instill some fear in the minds of the people. And that's why you find this terror attack in Punch, you find the hybrid terrorist. What is a hybrid terrorist? Hybrid terrorist is a local young man who is not even trained. But you know how much training does it require to operate a handgun, a pistol, or throw a grenade? It doesn't require very
Brainwashing
much.
more
You can
than
learn it.
training, Lieutenant General. I think it's
It's
brainwashing more than training.
absolute.
But you know, social media,
Yeah.
something that you spoke about as well. I'm going to take that point to SP Ved, former DGP Jammu and Kashmir, who's with us on the broadcast. You know, SP Vedji, social media being weaponized, that is something that has already been spoken about. But let's also try and understand the narrative of jihad. What is it? I mean, being a former DGP of Jammu and Kashmir, one has to be well versed with what jihad is, what jihad actually means, what it means to the people on ground, and how the negative interpretation of jihad via social media, like how it's being weaponized, something that the Lieutenant General on the broadcast was also talking about, it helped entrench the idea, the negative idea of jihad in the youngsters, the youth of Kashmir. Can you throw some light on that? What jihad is, what jihad means to these youngsters? Is there a negative connotation for jihad, or the meaning of jihad, what people perceive, is the actual meaning of jihad?
See, you know how radical Islam is taught to young minds in madrasas and also through the social media. How an ideology is the young boys are being brainwashed about an ideology that you are at the receiving end of a majority Hindu nation. Yeah, there are atrocities against the minorities. So you have to take on against the Kafirs, against all this, the narrative which Pakistan actually pursued and followed, not only in Kashmir, even to the young minds in Pakistan. Today, because of this ideology, to see the condition of Pakistan, where they have brought their nation to, the establishment pursued this. If you see in Pakistan how the young boys are being taught that the non-Muslims are kafirs, and how all sorts of negativity about India.
Right, right.
In fact, Pakistan's problem is it is a nation in denial. It's a nation based on hatred against its own origin, which was India, and they are trying to identify themselves either with Arabs, with Turks, with sometimes with other nationalities. So I think they are paying the price because of that, and that is what they pursued in Kashmir also. And young boys got, many of them, impressionable minds, particularly as General Dua Saab was mentioning, Burhan Wani's phenomena was very, very crucial. Though, if you see last 30 years, 2001 was the peak year of violence, and roughly terrorists 2000 plus used to be operating in Jammu and Kashmir. Today, those numbers have come less than 10%. And particularly after Burhan Wani, when increasingly social media was used to radicalize and float anti-India narrative, anti-national narrative, we had huge outburst of young boys coming, stone pelting, doing all sorts of kushti with all the security forces, what you are seeing on the screen. But
right.
I think a consistent policy of Operation All Out, which was started in 2016-17, and Pakistan started losing its game plan with a lot of cadres it was losing, lot of weapons it was losing. That's why 2 years back it came out with the revised strategy of having a, the strategy of uh, what do you call the hybrid terrorism, what you saw, targeted killings. Because at that kind of war, you are not losing your band, you are not losing your weapon. So even that has been to a very large extent controlled. You are seeing the winds of change in Kashmir. What you saw last 3 days is actually a clear message from India that Kashmir is changing. It is normal. You have markets opening till 9 o'clock. There is, it is because of twin and I would say three-pronged strategy. Number one, consistent attacks by the security forces on the terror infrastructure. Number two, and go after the terrorist and counter. Number three, pursue the policy of development, the development push which Prime Minister Modi's government is doing in Kashmir Valley has also brought a lot of change. Young boys are seeing hope in the days to come.
No, absolutely, absolutely. There is a fresh breath on the horizon in Jammu and Kashmir, certainly. But you said that that number has come down of targeted killings and the spate of terror, Pakistan-backed terror. I'm again reiterating here in the valley has come down to less than 10%. Lieutenant General Satish, you on the documentary have said that that number has really come down, but it's still not zero. How much more do we need to do? How long is it going to take for us to reach that number, to reach that definitive zero figure, and really say that we've culled out all terrorism, all terror activities out of Jammu and Kashmir? This is not to put you at on a spot, not to stick your neck out and give us a particular date, Lieutenant General, but just to give some hope to the viewers as well. I know we're in the right direction, but how soon can we look at that zero number, like no terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir?
Look, when you say that we were looking at a zero number, I don't think we are going to get to a zero, an absolute zero, in a hurry. What has taken more than 3 decades to spoil cannot be changed overnight, cannot be overturned overnight. So we are looking at a long call. Today, when we were operating there, we said all youth children are radicalized because they are children of midnight knock. They have suffered deprivations between the during the operations between security forces and the terrorists, and so on and so forth. Of course, the radicalization apart. But today, what we are seeing is that with this openness that we've been speaking of over the last 20-30 minutes, where opportunities of growth are better for these youngsters, where the aspirations of the youth are being met. So when we see today's youth, today's youngster, when he sees this and gets used to this, there is hope. There is hope for a better future. So whether the incidents of terrorism come down to zero, because absolute zero may be a tough call to achieve. That hasn't happened even in Punjab, even as of now. Something or the other keeps cropping up from once in a while that was solved 3 decades ago. So what we need to do, instead of calling for an absolute or looking for that absolute zero, we need to bring it under a certain threshold, a very manageable threshold, so that life can go on as normal, and we can prosecute development.
And in the meantime, give more priority to giving the youngsters the hope and aspirations that they deserve. That's actually a good point. But in the documentary as well, I'm going to quickly go back to the former DGP of Jammu and Kashmir, SP Ved. In the documentary, the north and the south has been differentiated. It's been, there's the Pir Panjal range that sort of divides the north and the south. And the north, in the documentary, it says, is much more controllable. It's the south of Pir Panjal that comes up with the right kind of challenges. Now, what are these challenges, sir? Is it the demography? Is it, more Muslim population than the Hindu population, than the minority population? Is it the geography? Is it the treacherous mountainous region of it? The Rocky Mountains themselves giving some sort of hideout to these terrorists? What's the biggest challenge, south of the Pir Panjal?
See, some of the terrain in north is even more difficult than south. If you see in Jammu region, hills of Doda, hills of Ramban, Kishtwar, Rajouri, Poonch are even much treacherous, much difficult than some portions of Kashmir. But the larger issue is in Kashmir Valley, you have a lot of areas where the terrorists would get shelter. The movement may not be detected, it may not be very easy, and the terrorists do get support structure, the ecosystem which actually supports that, which is not that readily available in Jammu region. So that makes it increasingly difficult for terrorists. Yes, we had incidents you saw in last few months, incidents in Rajouri, Poonch. Off and on, you do come across such terrorist attacks where we lost our brave soldiers. But then, by and large, Jammu region, it is not that easy for terrorists to operate. In fact, when terrorism was at its peak, there were a lot of areas in Jammu region like Kishtwar, Doda, and Rajouri, Poonch where we had a lot of terrorists operating and a lot of. But today that situation is completely changed, and they find it increasingly difficult. We have VDCs there, SPOs, network of operational groups, the deployment of army and paramilitary, which may be thinly if you compare with Kashmir Valley. But yes, Kashmir Valley, the ecosystem supporting terrorism is yet definitely still exists. Though we had a lot of, after abrogation of Article 370, a lot of attack on the ecosystem. The separatist politics, the people who were supporting, who were calling for ban, consistent policy of use of investigating agencies like NIA, like income tax, like CBI, like all these agencies, investigating agencies, going after the Habala money, going after the separatist people who were supporting the sports structure has been demolished. But yes, it has brought dividends of change of situation in Kashmir Valley. That's why you are seeing the winds of change. But simultaneously, people sitting in the administration, many of them have been purged by after abrogation of Article 370 by a Lieutenant Governor's government because it is directly under the government of India. Earlier, during the political government, it was not possible. So these things have brought a lot of change, and also with the participation of elections in Panchayat and three-tier system has brought a lot of hope in the young boys that they also have a bright future. And with holding of such a event in Kashmir, a very clear message has gone across the world that Kashmir is changing.
Well, absolutely. You know what, to both the gentlemen with us on the broadcast here, I know it's the G20 meeting that's taking place, the G20 nations, the delegations are in Srinagar. I don't want to dampen those celebrations. There's a lot of decoration. The entire, Srinagar cultural beauty has been decked up to really showcase for all the people who've come from different parts of the world. But before we wrap this conversation up, Lieutenant General Satish, the SCO in Goa, the G7, the G20, it seems like, the Pakistan delegation that was here, the attack that took place in Poonch, all of that, it had a lot of suspect timing. But the way India tackled that, the way External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar gave it back to the Pakistan delegation, saying that, the stand that you're basically taking is, hypocrite in nature. Do you think something like that has really gone down well in the global community? India's rising stature in the South Pacific is something everybody is already talking about with Narendra Modi's recent trip to Fiji, Papua New Guinea and Australia as well. It was a proper rock show. India on the global stage, and the way External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is really giving it back to Pakistan. We are in the right direction, but people are calling it something that people are essentially saying that that move was a little too aggressive for global diplomacy's liking.
Well, there will be views and there will be views. Whether it's too aggressive or not is a matter of individual perception. But the fact remains that on one hand, India is growing, not only growing in economic terms, India is also growing very confident of itself. Maybe it's a fallout of economic terms, but it also to do with bold leadership, very strong leadership that we have at center today. There could be situations where a country could be growing, but if the leadership is not bold enough and imaginative enough to carry out these changes, then it might not help. So, to my mind, the very incisive remarks and very bold remarks given by our external affairs minister, the way you mentioned about how Prime Minister Modi is taking these events together, it reminds me, there was a cartoon in, I think it was Times of India yesterday, which showed how it showed circles of the G20, SCO, the meeting in Kashmir, the BRICS, and everything all around him. And then Mr. Modi walking in center, and he's wearing a sash called Mr. India. That is the kind of sway, the kind of influence today India is able to wield. And I'm sure the world now is looking up to India, whether it is Quad or SCO or multilateral engagements. The youth in Kashmir will also be able to see this is the model to follow and not the failed model of Pakistan. The country is in doomsday crisis by itself, and how can they be helping Kashmiris in their cause? So I think this is a good moment for India, and our leadership is being very astute about it.
Well, absolutely. Lieutenant General Satish Dua and former DGP of Jammu and Kashmir, SP Vaid, many thanks to both of you. Gentlemen, it's always nice to speak to you on various topics. At this point in time, it seems like it's fair to say that the question mark that we've put behind us in the background over there, it's clearly disappearing, it's vanishing a little bit. The next time we put it out there, I think we're going to let go of the question mark, because jihad, it seems, certainly is dying in Kashmir. When will that number come to a zero? Should we even be focusing on it being zero, or rather prioritizing what the youngsters want, what does the youth of Kashmir want, the aspirations, the hopes of the people of Jammu and Kashmir? That should be our top priority. And it seems like the bold leadership that Lieutenant General Satish Dua and the former DGP of Jammu and Kashmir were talking about is really bearing the fruit, the patience that we need. And we certainly are headed in the right direction on the global front and locally in Jammu and Kashmir as well. Well, that's all the time we have for you in this edition of News9 Plus special show on our documentaries. We're going to leave you with that particular snippet. Keep it with News9 Live.
The Jihad machine brainwashed Kashmiri youth.
We saw it going so bad.
We were not prepared for it.
Phases of turbulence.
जम्मू एंड कश्मीर के पीएको को आप भारत का हिस्सा नहीं मानते हो क्या? एग्रेसिव ना हो, जान दे देंगे इसके लिए।
Today, we have a good control.
There is a feeling of normalcy that is setting in.
Kashmir, marred by conflict and violence. For decades, the shadow of Pakistan-sponsored terror had eclipsed the Muslim-majority region. Local youth were radicalized in the late 1980s by Pakistan's spy agency, Inter-Services Intelligence. High on the idea of jihad, a religious war in the name of Islam that terrorized the Indian state. Many of them crossed the border to be trained by the jihadis. 4 years since the abrogation of Article 370, a semblance of calm has returned to the valley. Infiltration of terrorists from Pakistan is at an all-time low. Peace no longer seems to be a distant dream.
I nostalgically remember Kashmir since the first time I went there in 1980 December. We could move from our transit camps, board a public transport bus, go to Lal Chowk, come back, go to a movie hall, and that was the time when we were waiting for the next move. So our transit camps were the place where we halted, and then we saw it going so bad.
At the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Foreign Ministers gathering in Goa, when the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, said meaningful discussions between India and Pakistan cannot happen until Article 370 is restored. The day Bhutto was in Goa, 5 Indian personnel were killed in an encounter with terrorists in Poonch. This was days after 5 Indian Army soldiers were killed in a terror attack in the same Jammu region. A Pakistan-based outfit, Jaish-e-Mohammed's splinter group, claimed responsibility for both these terror attacks. India's Minister for External Affairs, Dr. S. Jaishankar, slammed Bhutto over his remark.
Victims of terrorism do not sit together with perpetrators of terrorism to discuss terrorism. Victims of terrorism defend themselves, counter acts of terrorism, they call it out, they delegitimize it, and that is exactly what is happening. So, to come here and preach these hypocritical words as though we are on the same boat, I mean, they are committing acts of terrorism.
That the valley is on the road to peace is evident with Srinagar hosting its first ever G20 meeting.
India is making a very strong, bold statement to the world. And I think there should be no compromise at all on this issue of the tourism meet which is taking place in Srinagar. It's a very good projection to the world. It is actually embedding the whole idea of the Article 370 having been done away with, etc., Kashmir being fully integrated with India.
After 3 decades of terror and bloodshed, Kashmir hosting a global diplomatic event is historic. While Pakistan is gripped with political, economic and security chaos, India is engaging with the international community in Kashmir, once the hub of jihadi terror. New Delhi wants to send out a loud and clear message to the entire world.